And as ice caps retreated from the temperate zone back into the polar latitudes, all of this water had to go somewhere, and it melted off and rushed in vast torrents into the world's oceans and raised the sea level globally by about 300 feet. So any cities that had been built in coastal regions, say 12, 15,000 years ago, sank beneath the waves as the sea level rose. Well, it turns out some of these ancient cities are now being rediscovered.
Wow.
We're not taught about that either, but it just buttresses the idea and provides support for the idea that, you know what, thousands of years ago, there was another civilization we're not taught about. It seems it was global in scope. It had advanced technology that in some cases we can't duplicate today. We don't have the ability to excavate and dress hundreds of tons of large stones weighing hundreds of tons, to dress them and fit them with near optical precision, let alone move them around over miles of uneven topography. Yet there was a civilization 5, 10, 15,000 years ago that had that ability, and we're not taught about that civilization in our mainstream history and anthropology. We have a kind of global amnesia, and the powers that be that are controlling this planet are doing everything they can to see that we don't remember who we are, where we came from, the heights that we attained thousands of years ago.
You went to Egypt, didn't you, with a French Egyptologist, Antoine, is it Gigal?
Yes.
Talk about that.
I went with Antoine twice, and I took a wonderful tour of Egypt. We got into some sites that most tourists don't go to. Antoine has a husband who has dual Egyptian and Italian citizenship, and she also has lived in Egypt many years and speaks Egyptian Arabic fluently. She is French by birth, but speaks several languages fluently, and Egyptian Arabic is one of them. So she knows the country very well. She knows some archaeologists there, and so she got us, it was a very small group of 6 or 7 people, into some places that most tour groups don't go. And I saw a lot of unusual things, including I saw granite, large granite blocks that had very smooth, small diameter holes drilled in them that were really very straight and very smooth, and you could see some faint grooves on the inside of the holes, meaning that ancient Egypt, like 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, had machine technology. Because nowadays you can only drill through granite with diamond-tipped drills. The oil industry does it all the time to drill for petroleum, because when you get down underground and you're drilling through the granite to get to the oil deposits, the oil industry has to use diamond-tipped drills, because you can't even cut through granite with steel drills. The granite is harder than steel, in other words. Only diamond is harder than the granite. And yet, the ancient Egyptians were drilling very smooth, straight holes through granite, and I saw this with my own eyes. You couldn't do this in a modern machine shop because they don't have diamond-tipped drills. So what that means is the ancient Egyptians had high-speed diamond-tipped drills or something like that. And yet we're told they did everything with copper chisels. Not so. Physically impossible. In other words, there was a highly developed technology thousands of years ago that existed, and we've been lied to. All of this has been hidden from us.
I think that Bouval's and Hancock's book, Message of the Sphinx, A Quest for the Hidden Legacy of Mankind, placing the Sphinx's age at 12,000 years or more, mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
I think they're right. I've been to the Sphinx, and by the way, when I was to the Sphinx, there was a doorway open near the rear. You can't go right up to the Sphinx. It's blocked off with a fence, and there are armed guards who would arrest you or maybe even shoot you if you went in there. So you can't get in there, but there clearly is a passageway inside the Sphinx. again, we have not been told everything about ancient Egypt. There are mysteries and secrets and information and knowledge that's being held back from us by those in the know, the cognoscenti. But yes, the Sphinx is clearly very old, and I agree with that analysis that indeed it is far older than we have been told and predates anything in our history books.
So in your view, and also obviously Graham Hancock's and Robert Bauval, is Egypt the key evidence for a new translation of history?
Yes, there are many keys, but frequently you speak of a keystone. I would say it would be appropriate to speak of Egypt, or rather the cover-up of the true history of Egypt, as one of the key keystones, or maybe the key keystone for getting at the true history of the human race. In theory, there are others, but it's probably the most prominent. I believe there are people who do have access to some of the information that would open up this breach, if you will, and start the flow of genuine information about our true history that has been hidden from us. I think Zahi Hawass, who is the director of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt, and who is the administrator in charge of places like the Sphinx and the pyramids and the other ancient archaeological sites in Egypt, he would be one of the gatekeepers of the truth. People like him are put in that type of position to hold back the truth. And they dole out little bits of historical fact by dribs and by drabs, taking care not to give away the store, not to divulge pieces of information that would begin to break this great broad dam of information behind which all of the truth has been held back. So people like him are key, and he's one of the big names internationally. And you have to understand that the big major universities like and museums like the Smithsonian and Harvard and places like that, the Sorbonne, the Louvre, places like that, they're part of the international conspiracy of silence. There's a real conspiracy to keep the human race deaf, dumb, and blind. It's part of the mind control program on this planet to keep us from knowing who we are and what our real history is.
You can kind of see evidence of what you're talking about, even in things like Gavin Menzies, who wrote the book 1421.
I've never read that book.
It basically shows that the Chinese were here in America before we called it America. And he
I've
brought
read
together
about the book, but I've never read.
Yeah, he went through a lot of attack for bringing forth evidence that Columbus had a map of America already.
Sure, he did. And in fact, there are some Native American groups in North America that had this knowledge. When I was completing my PhD in political science, I knew personally a man who was studying at the same university and who was a member by birth of one of the Pueblo reservations in New Mexico. And he told me that in their tradition, which, by the way, is not very much shared with outsiders, the Pueblo cultures have held on to their traditions pretty tightly. They're suspicious of white people with good reason. There's good history for being suspicious. But he told me that one of their stories, going back centuries, is about the Japanese. And they knew about the Japanese because centuries past, from the Far East, trading parties would come across the Pacific. And they would come inland trading for things like turquoise, which are relatively plentiful in the American Southwest. And so they would come over to the Four Corners region of New Mexico and Arizona, trading for turquoise, which they would then take back across the Pacific Ocean to Japan and China. But he said, we knew about the Japanese before you guys got here. We called them the frog people because they came across the pond. But understand, for the people in the Southwest, the pond was not the Atlantic Ocean, but the Pacific Ocean.
Very interesting. There is a similar consciousness that just repeats itself over and over.